start by just kind of briefly give me an idea of kind of your career? I mean, you're a college lecturer, but what was, just talk me through really the beginning.
I first started cooking in Renmore Barracks in the army down the road there, and very, 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 I suppose, tough kitchen. They ran a party system down there, and initially when I went in there I would have been on veg and potatoes. I was there for about a year and a half, then I moved on to other sections. You'd spend about roughly at least a year in each section. All the butchery was done, everything was done on the hoof, nothing, no convenience at all. So in that sense, it was, although it was tough, it was a fantastic place to train. Yeah. I would have worked in a lot of restaurants in the city and around the county, hotels as well, picking up ideas and discarding some ideas also. Yeah. They're not all, like, there's a lot of cowboys out there as well. Yeah. There's a lot of excellent chefs, but there's a lot of cowboys too, and you pick up things, and I was long enough around to that's not the way to go. I applied for a course in Colin Street. It was much sought after. It was very difficult to get on it. It was a City and Guilds course. It was Kitchen and Larder 7063. Again, it was part-time. And I got it, and I was really, really happy with that. The lecturer was a guy called Jimmy Kilbride. He just passed away there recently, and the guy was an absolute legend, and his knowledge of classic cuisine, he was amazing. And he was one of the guys that really inspired me to lecture, to start teaching. And that was in 1990, I think. It was a 2-year course. It was mostly based around cuisine of Scofia. The whole 2 years was about that, cooking the recipes, refining the recipes. And if he thought then that you were good enough, then maybe contemporize those recipes. And what I took away from that particular course was a good understanding and appreciation of the classics.
Yeah. Do you think that that's, we'll say, a better way to train? I'm talking about from a young chef's perspective now. Is it better to train in the French style or in the kind of Nordic style, which a lot of chefs are training today?
I suppose those views would vary. My own personal view would be that, like French cuisine now in the 21st century, I don't think it's not absolutely dead in the water, but it's no longer at the pinnacle of cuisine. It no longer stands alone. At those heights as what it used to be. However, I certainly would argue that chefs need to understand the basics, and much of which is rooted in French cuisine. So, in that sense, and I remember speaking to Michel Roux, he was here a few years ago, and I asked him a question about, is the Scofia dead? He said, of course he's not dead. His cuisine is still very much alive. Today, that those basics are still there, and you have to have the basics. In the terms of Nordic cuisine, it is interesting, but for me, it's still important that you have those basics, which are essentially French.
Yeah. I know, and I know you know as well, that it's not all rosy in a kitchen. There are loads of negative aspects to the kitchen. Do you really think that you're sending cooks every year? You're sending cooks into the industry. Do you really think that you're sending them into a good, fair, clean industry?
I suppose the short answer to that question would be yes. I definitely do think we're sending them into a good industry. However, as an industry, it has its problems. It has its issues. From, for example, like high staff turnover to chef shortage. Pay would be a big issue. I've spoken to a lot of chefs recently. Pay is a problem for them. Long unsocial hours is another area, and indeed mental health or burnout, I suppose. When Mark Moriarty spoke about that, Food on the Edge, and it was really, really interesting. And I think we need to deal with a lot of those challenges in industry. But for me personally, the industry has been very, very good to me, and to work with food is a huge privilege. And where else do you get to use all your senses. You're being creative. I've got to travel. I've met lots of interesting people, and as I said, it's a way of life for me. It was never really a job. So, and I'm a long time at it, and I still love it. I'm always thinking about food. So maybe it's just a personal thing, where I do encourage people to go into industry and go out there, because I think it's a wonderful industry, and I know it has got a lot of flack and so on, particularly in social media, around a lot of the negatives. But we need to also look at the positives,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm inclined to look at the positives. I think it's a fantastic industry.
Great. Do you really think that chefs nowadays are trained to a high enough standard in culinary colleges?
That's a very, very interesting question, and I suppose if you're to look at it in a general perspective, for me, you know, it's not about blaming, you know, it's more about collaborating and working together. And I believe we're good at that, you know. And in terms of training, like no one is perfect, you know. As I said, I started training in a kitchen, in a military kitchen, and for me, that's where the real learning begins. And I spent a long time in industry, both working as a chef and also training the younger generation when I was in industry. More recently, you know, I started lecturing here in GMIT 2010.
Right.
And for me, it's a huge privilege to work with such a dedicated and passionate team, you know, led by Jacinta Dalton, who in my view was a breath of fresh air.
I agree.
You know, in the Department of Culinary Arts, we're constantly rethinking the curriculum in line with industry, science, technology, seasonality, and so on. And, you know, depending on what, we run lots of courses here, depending on what course the student is on and actually finishes, essentially they come away with a basic fundamental skill set, you know, an understanding of nutrition, costing, food safety, a good working knowledge of kitchen equipment, and I suppose more crucially, the ability to chop, dice, slice and so on with the minimum amount of supervision. But more crucially though, when that student goes into the professional kitchen, the onus is now on the chef to not only train, but to mentor, to guide, and indeed inspire that individual so they can achieve their full potential. So, I mean, in that sense, I feel we are sending them out into industry. We have played our part, but the bigger part is now on to industry to fulfill their role.
It's interesting. Okay. Perfect. Martin, thanks.
My pleasure.
Thanks a million. Right.